Once again, belief influences effort, effort influences achievement, and achievement influences confidence. If we start at the very beginning of that chain, we come to the idea of belief. And what we want to explore in part this morning is the belief that students bring into the classroom that can significantly influence their learning and achievement. And that is what they believe about intelligence. Now, you've probably never considered a belief about intelligence, but actually we do hold beliefs about intelligence. And what we believe about intelligence influences the effort we're willing to give, which in turn influences the achievement that we reach, which ultimately influences our confidence. When we talk about intelligence, there are two opposing beliefs. One is that you are born with a certain measure of intelligence. That when you're born, you know all you're ever going to know with regard to just about any topic. The opposing belief is that you're not born smart or not, you get smart. And you get smart through effort. And we've often heard this described as nature versus nurture, which is an oversimplification of the belief, but it's somewhat appropriate to think of it that way. And what students believe as they come into your classrooms influences how they behave in your classroom. And by behavior, I'm not talking about classroom management issues. I'm talking about how they approach learning. One of the things that's influenced by this belief is goals that students have. For example, if I believe that I'm born smart or not, my goal in your classroom as one of your students is to look smart and to do whatever is necessary to convince you that I was one of the ones who was born with the gift of smarts. If you think about that, if my goal is to look smart and I'm willing to do what's necessary to look smart, that opens me up to the temptation of cheating. Because cheating is one way. If I lack confidence in what I know or don't know, or I don't recognize what the limits of my knowledge at some point, cheating is a way to keep looking smart. Now, the opposite belief, that's not the goal. The goal is not to look smart. The goal is to learn. And so you can see that difference in your classroom, how those goals play out. The student who's trying to only look smart versus the student whose goal is to learn. Another thing that's influenced by this belief is the student's perspective on work. See, if you believe that you're born smart, then you believe that you shouldn't have to work hard. You believe that smart doesn't work. And if you work hard, it's an indication that possibly you weren't born smart. Whereas the student who believes that you get smart through effort is willing to put forth effort, is willing to work because work holds the promise of increased intelligence. So the belief influences the goals that students have in the classroom. It influences the perspectives that students have on work in the classroom, and it also influences their response to setback. For example, students who believe that you are born with a certain measure of intelligence or not avoid risk. Anytime you make a mistake, it's an indication that you weren't born smart, as opposed to looking at a mistake as, oh, this is an opportunity to gain some feedback on what I've done wrong so that I can make correction and do it better the next time. Brain chemistry plays a significant role in this response. When we try something and we expect a certain outcome, when that outcome actually happens, the brain releases the neurotransmitter dopamine, which gives us that feeling of satisfaction, like, oh, I tried something and it worked, hooray. But when what we try and the outcome that we achieve doesn't match, when we get an outcome that's different from what we expect, we don't get that release of dopamine. We interpret that feeling as disappointment. And what you do with that disappointment determines whether the error you made becomes an opportunity for learning or not. Because when we experience disappointment, when we have tried something and we have made a mistake, we are actually in one of the best possible places in terms of the mind. We are one of the best possible places for learning. But, and this is critical, only if we're willing to attend to our mistakes. See, the child who believes that you're born smart or not does not want to look at his or her mistakes, because it's an indication that Possibly he or she was not born as smart as he or she had hoped. Whereas the learning mindset says, hey, I made a mistake. I didn't get the outcome that I expected. What went wrong? And when we can figure out, when we actually attend to our mistakes, when we recognize we've made a mistake and we go back and we say, okay, what is it that went wrong? The brain is in an optimal state for learning. The brain is in an optimal state for insight. Some of the deepest learning occurs immediately following an error if the student is willing to attend to the error. With students who believe you're born smart or not, they're threatened by other people's success. As opposed to the child who has the learning mindset, they're actually inspired by other people's success. The child who thinks you're born smart or not becomes defensive and gives up easily. They're not resilient or not as resilient as they could be. Whereas the child with the learning mindset views negative feedback, views error and the recognition of error as an opportunity for feedback and an opportunity for learning. So in the classroom, we can see these beliefs influence the goals that students bring with them, the perspective that students have with regards to work, especially when work becomes challenging, and how students respond to setback, how resilient they are. Now let me make a couple more points with regard to this belief. First of all, the belief can vary from discipline to discipline. I've been in high school faculty lounges before and heard interesting conversations between two teachers. The reason I say high school is because in high school oftentimes you'll have discipline-based teaching. So you'll have a math teacher perhaps and an English teacher perhaps who are having a conversation. And the English teacher may say something like, I don't know what to do with Joe. I cannot get him to read any of the assignments. I can't get him to respond to questions in class. I can't get Joe to write me more than a couple sentences when they ask the students to write. I just don't seem to be getting anything from him, and I don't know what to do. And the math teacher may say, are you talking about Joe Jones? Because in my class, Joe is a model student. He works hard, completes all of the assignments. Man, he really gives me his best in class. And yep, they're talking about the same student. What's different? The child is going into English class thinking, man, I really don't get this. I was just probably not born smart in this particular area. Whereas in math class, Joe feels, hey, I get this. This is easy for me. I'm willing to learn. I'm willing to give forth effort. He's a totally different student. And the reason is that he's different in those two classes is because he's carrying a different belief into each of those two classrooms. So the belief may vary from discipline to discipline. The second point I want to make with regard to this before we have some time for interaction is that parents significantly influence how a child thinks about intelligence. You may have been told as a child, or you may have even said this to a child, something like this, oh, you know, I know why you are not good in science, because when I was your age, I wasn't good in science either. As soon as a parent says something like that, they have articulated the wrong view of intelligence. And they have reinforced in the child's mind, you know what, I wasn't born smart in this particular area, and what does the child conclude? There's no reason to even try. I'm never going to be better than I am right now, so giving forth, continuing to give forth significant effort is not going to yield any significant results. So parents significantly influence that, and by the way, teachers, your words can too. As we'll see as we move forward, the actual words that are said and how they are communicated have a significant influence on students' beliefs about intelligence.